Hi everyone, welcome back to the Ranger Shop. So in this episode, we're going to discuss the front ends a little bit of our trucks, how to check them, fairly quick video about how to check the front end, but also I'm going to be replacing the inner tie rod end, so we'll show you how I do that. So let's get started. First of all, let's go through how we check them. So a good way to test them, to check them, is to have someone in the cab. First of all, just rock the wheel back and forth before we lift it up. That'll test our outer tie rod ends, our inner tie rod ends, see if maybe anything's loose in there. Okay, so with the front end, as you're rocking the steering wheel back and forth, you'll check your outer tie rod end here. See if there's any play inside this joint here. And sometimes it's just a slight play. It's easier if you can kind of put your hand over it and feel if this is moving separate from this. If the knuckle and the tie rod are moving together, it's okay. The next place is inside here. This is your inner tie rod. It goes right into your steering rack. And in here, there's also a knuckle, and there can be play back and forth in there. Sometimes you can just grab it, like with this, I can grab it and I can feel right now that there's got play in that, moves back and forth. So I know this is already shot, but I just had my wife rock it back and forth, and I could see that play. So then once you get the steering, you know if there's any play in your steering, then you can jack up the truck, and you'll check your lower ball joint and your upper ball joint up there. So that you can do with just a bar underneath your tire here, and as long as you get a little bit of leverage, you'll see this move up and down here. And if that's moving up and down or out side to side, then you've got a worn out ball joint. Same with the upper one, if it's going up and down. The upper one, sometimes you need to grab it with a pair of channel locks and just squeeze it down, and you'll see if there's play in there. With the upper one, it's usually replaced as a one piece. It's a whole control arm with ball joint assembly. And then with your wheel bearing, to check your wheel bearing, you can just rock it side to side with your hands. I usually do it diagonally, and you can feel that if all different directions you can move it, then it's got an issue. So that's it right now. We know that our inner tie rod needs to be replaced. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jack the truck up now and pull the tires off. I already loosened off this lock nut here. This is the lock nut for the tie rod end. So I've loosened that off. Now what I'll do is I'll take this joint off here, the tie rod end. To take this off, you just undo this nut, and then you kind of hit this with a hammer, and this will pop up because it's like a tapered. Once that's up, just thread this off. Then you can slide the boot off. They've just got this hose clamp that was on the boot there, but sometimes there's just like a little squeeze clamp, spring clamp. And so then I'll slide that boot off there. Once the boot's off there, you'll be able to see the knuckle, and then you just crank it one way or the other. I'm going to crank it all the way this way. Get in there with my pipe wrench and get that off there. But we'll show you that. Let's get this thing off. So just a couple tips here. So just to make sure that I put once I get the new inner tie rod back on, and I want it all the same so I don't have to go and redo my alignment. I should, but I probably won't. It's got old tires right now. I'll wait until I put in some new tires on it, and then I'll redo alignment. So I counted how many turns coming off with the outer tie rod end. There's 25 turns on there. And now I'm just going to measure it from that nut to here. It's 1.5 inches. So that's fairly easy to remember. I'm just going to write that down. So left hand side, 1.5 inches and 25 turns. And then I can take this nut off and then slide this boot off of here and then get this inner tie rod out. Okay, so we got our boot off of here now. Took this nut off. Everything's ready to go. You can see, I'm just going to show you here the play in here. Let me just focus in on that. Okay, there we go. So watch this as I move it back and forth. See how it moves there? So that gives you a lot of wandering on the road, lots of play. Anyways, to get this thing off, it's fairly easy. You just have to crank the steering all the way this way, and then you'll be able to get onto that. There's a big nut on here where that comes off the steering rack. There you can see now it's cranked all the way out, the steering wheel this way. You can see there's lots of room to get this. There's a special tool where it allows you to go in and undo these, but honestly on the Ford Ranger you don't really need it. It's more for like cars, imports, a lot of the cars, because they're in further and you really got to work at getting them out of that tube. So this is easy. What I use for this is I just use one of these pipe wrenches. It's a plumbing tool, but it grabs onto it nicely, and you just grab on. Make sure you don't touch the rack itself, but just the nut here on the very end. Just grab onto it right here. It doesn't matter if you damage it, because this is all going to be replaced. Here's a new one here. So I recommend Moog if you're going to get one, or an actual OEM part, but you need some decent quality. These aren't things you want to do twice. So you can see there, that's the new one. A little bit of thread locker there for the end, and in it goes. Nice easy job. So we'll get you back on a time lapse here as we get this thing off. And there we go, the thing's off now. So what I'm just going to do is just clean up around here, a little bit of grease on here, clean this shaft off, all the dirt out of it. It's pretty rare for these to be leaking unless they've been hit. If you get hit, or if the boot breaks and then dirt and stuff gets in here, then yeah, for sure it'll cause a leak. But if the boot's good and it hasn't been damaged, no accidents, then it's pretty rare for it to be hit or leaking. So I'll just screw that on there now.